Welcome to History Explained, where we illuminate the past to better understand our present. I'm your guide for this weekly dose of 7 days under 7 minutes. Today is Sunday, June 8, 2025. As we do every Saturday, we explore military history, those decisive battles, enduring legacies, and strategic flashpoints that have shaped nations in armed conflict. This week, from June 2nd to June 8th, the world reflected on iconic battles, military transitions, and the evolving face of warfare in our time. We begin on June 6th, which marked the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the Allied landing on the beaches of Normandy during World War II. In ceremonies held across France, the UK, the US, and Canada, veterans, families, and world leaders honored the more than 150,000 troops who launched the largest amphibious invasion in history. French President Emmanuel Macron and US President Joe Biden stood side by side at Omaha Beach, delivering solemn tributes to the courage and sacrifice that turned the tide of the war. With World War II veterans now well into their late 90s and beyond, this year's commemoration felt especially poignant, a passing of the torch to future generations responsible for safeguarding the freedoms won that day. On June 3rd, the European Union convened a high-level defense and security summit in Brussels, aimed at increasing defense integration among EU member states. In the wake of prolonged conflict in Ukraine and growing geopolitical tension, EU leaders discussed new frameworks for shared procurement, joint exercises, and enhanced cyber defense cooperation. Analysts noted this marks a turning point in European military strategy, moving away from reliance on NATO alone and toward a more autonomous European defense capability. While still in early stages, these discussions evoke Cold War-era alliances and reveal how modern military cooperation is rapidly evolving. In South Africa, the post-election power-sharing agreement announced on June 7 also had significant implications for defense policy. For the first time in its democratic era, South Africa's military leadership is being reshaped under a coalition government. New leadership in the Ministry of Defense has pledged to modernize the country's military forces and address concerns about corruption, readiness, and peacekeeping operations across the continent. Regional observers are watching closely to see if South Africa can reassert itself as a stabilizing force in southern Africa amid growing threats from insurgent groups and border insecurity. Meanwhile, the U.S. Department of Defense released a June 4th update on its ongoing operations in the Red Sea and Gulf of Aden. Amid escalating attacks on commercial shipping by regional militias, U.S. naval forces have increased drone patrols and multinational escort missions under Operation Sentinel. Military strategists noted the renewed emphasis on maritime security draws parallels with Cold War convoy operations, but now against asymmetric threats rather than peer rivals, illustrating how military doctrine must adapt to a new generation of conflict. On June 5, Russia held large-scale naval drills in the Arctic, with dozens of warships and aircraft simulating scenarios involving foreign intrusion and resource protection. The exercises came amid rising global competition for Arctic routes and mineral resources, exacerbated by climate change. Military analysts warn that the region, once considered geopolitically dormant, may become a major flashpoint in coming decades. The display of Arctic force this week echoes historical rivalries now shifting to new frontiers. In Israel, military tensions flared along the northern border after drone strikes targeted positions in southern Lebanon. The Israeli Defense Forces launched retaliatory airstrikes on June 6, marking the most serious exchange of fire since early 2024. While no major escalation has occurred yet, the episode serves as a reminder of how quickly long-standing hostilities can reignite, and how fragile ceasefires remain in multi-front theaters of conflict. Back in the U.S., the Army's 80th Infantry Division celebrated its centennial on June 7 with ceremonies at Fort Eustis, Virginia. Formed during World War I, the division played roles in both World Wars, the Cold War, and post-9/11 operations. Veterans and active duty soldiers marked the event with parades, reenactments, and remembrance services, highlighting how institutional memory and tradition serve as the backbone of modern military professionalism. And finally, global headlines this week were filled with commentary surrounding cyber warfare, after a June 2 joint NATO report identified significant increases in AI-driven intrusion attempts against energy infrastructure. While no physical conflict occurred, the warnings point to an invisible battlefield where algorithms, not bullets, may dictate the next great strategic contest. For military historians, this shift from steel to software represents a fundamental redefinition of warfare, one that demands new frameworks for both deterrence and accountability. From storming beaches to surveilling cyberspace, this past week has reminded us that military history is not confined to the past. It continues unfolding, in strategy rooms, on battlefields, and in global security summits, shaping the choices nations make today. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Military History. If you found this episode thought-provoking, subscribe and share it with those who follow defense and diplomacy through a historical lens. Up next, our Sunday episode, where we explore the innovations and inventions that revolutionized civilization. Until then, I'm your guide for History Explained, where understanding yesterday is the key to navigating tomorrow.